Excuse me for my voice, but I have never seen anything like it.
You believe in miracles? Yes! Unbelievable.
Welcome to the podcast. It's our favorite day of the week. It is Film Friday, where we break down a movie that we just saw. We just left the movie theater. I actually literally just left the movie theater and recorded this podcast for you guys on Fantasy Island. So this movie came out on Valentine's Day. I did not go see it on Valentine's Day. I had better things to do. A bunch of other movies have come out since then. Sonic the Hedgehog has been getting incredible reviews. Doesn't make a ton of sense to me. You're never going to hear that movie review on this podcast channel. Go listen to it somewhere else. But Fantasy Island, let me give you a little background before we get into what I liked and what I didn't like. And spoiler alert right now. This is a spoiler-filled podcast. I'm not going to sugarcoat anything for you. If you haven't seen the movie yet, I would suggest you go see it. If you don't plan on seeing this movie because you've seen terrible reviews, then sit back and relax because I'm going to break this movie down for you. So I had no idea anything about this movie. I had not seen a trailer for it. I had not seen any promotion for it. I knew nothing about this. And then my friend Rebecca came up to me in the newsroom and said, "Hey, Zimmel, I'm thinking about seeing this movie. You should check it out. You know, you do this podcast. You should see it." And I kind of was like, Fantasy Island, is that some sort of, like, sex movie? It's coming out on Valentine's Day? Is this, like, 50 Shades of Grey? Like, what's happening here? She goes, no, it's like a horror. So I pulled up the trailer. I watched the trailer on YouTube, and I was intrigued immediately. Because I said, this seems like the type of thriller type of movie that I can get behind. Look. When we break down movies, we did all the Oscar, the Best Picture movies, and we looked at those through a very critical eye. When you look at a superhero movie, you look at it through is this movie going to entertain me? You look at a horror movie, you can break it down two ways. Most people will break it down one way, which is, did this movie legitimately scare me? Did this movie make me stay up at night? Did this movie put terrors in my nightmares? For me, that doesn't really, I don't really care that much about that. I care more about, was this movie entertaining to me? Did the entire time I sat in the movie theater, how many times did I think about checking my phone? How many times did I think about checking the time? How many times did I want to get out of this movie? And to be completely honest with you, if you go and you read any of the reviews on IMDb, if you read any reviews on Metacritic, Rotten Tomatoes is really what we go off of on this podcast, but you can go anywhere for your movie reviews. People hate this movie. People gave it terrible scores. There's like a 9%, I think, on Rotten Tomatoes right now. It's at 10% the last time I checked it. And it doesn't make a ton of sense to me because I didn't think this movie was the worst thing ever. I didn't think this movie was as bad as people made it out to be. And I'm going to tell you why. Because when we do these movie reviews, I always give you the pros and the cons, and we always look at it through a pretty good lens, I think. I think we do a good job on this podcast of being pretty objective. So it starts off as these group of people are coming into this fantasy island. Okay, they won the ticket to go to this island, and Michael Pineda plays the guy that's kind of the ambassador. He plays the guy that is there to bring on the new people, and he also owns the island, right? So he says, all your wildest dreams, your fantasies are going to come true, which immediately should raise red flags to anybody. Okay, immediately if you get on a plane, you go to a secluded island, and immediately they have to say, well, there's no cell phone service, just by the way, no cell phone service. So that kind of solves that problem of, okay, in horror movies in the 21st century, just pick up your phone and call somebody to get out of here. And that happens later in the movie where they were able to make a phone call, which doesn't make a ton of sense to me. Maybe these guys have like Sprint or Verizon, they don't have like a very good cell phone service. But they get off the plane, there's no cell phone service. He says, your wildest dreams are going to come true. Just FYI, tomorrow you're going to wake up and everything's going to go. So I don't want to give you too much, don't want to give too much away, but there's one woman who her biggest regret is not marrying this guy 5 years ago. Another one wants to kind of terrorize her high school bully who bullied her so terribly bad. One guy wants to become a war hero. You know, his fantasy was to enlist and his mom wouldn't let him. And then another one is a brother, and he brings his younger brother with him, and they want to have at all. They just want to have a crazy party, be wicked rich. Cool. All right. So they all go their separate ways, and then slowly but surely you find out that this is all happening in real life. That the things that they're fantasizing, and it comes down to the woman who wants to get revenge, I should say. Sorry. Another thing about this movie is that it was a later showing. We're recording this at the wee hours in the morning, so forgive me if there's a couple stumbles here, because wasn't the easiest movie to sit through either. So we recognize very quickly as an audience that there's a problem when the woman who's torturing what looks like her high school bully grown up, okay, it's really happening. That's really when the first red flags start coming up. And then, the entire thing falls into chaos, and you find out that, oh, this is like a twist with a twist with a twist with a twist, which this is, I've given you like enough of the synopsis that if you are going to go see the movie, this is right where you can like get out, right? If you're going to go see the movie, get out now, because now we're going to start getting into the depths. Because I'm going to start with the things that I really enjoyed about this movie before we do the negatives. We're going to talk about things we like. It's 2020, we're being positive. So things I really liked about this movie. The acting core was great. I love Jimmy O Yang, who was in Silicon Valley. He's got a stand-up special on Netflix. He's great. Michael Pineda is incredible too. Okay, you see him in Ant-Man. I think he's been in a couple other. I think he might have a stand-up special now too on Netflix. And Netflix gives everybody a stand-up special, so that wouldn't shock me. The entire cast, very good. Not a lot of big-name actors. Everybody is a kind of a supporting actor in this movie. There's not any one lead person who blows my doors off. It felt like a bunch of television actors. Before I went to see this movie, my friend told me that it felt like a 1980s, thriller with the money that they put into 2020 soap operas. So just a high-budget horror movie. And I don't know if that's completely true. I'm not willing to go that far into it. But I will say that it did give me... It was weird. It was like Final Destination kind of vibes to it, and I don't know if the people who've seen this movie also kind of think that way. That it felt like a very high budget Final Destination. Like if they rebooted Final Destination, this would be the type of movie that they do. The second thing I really liked is I thought that it was really cool, the levels of the twists. Okay, where you start off with you're like, I don't really know who's like why these fantasies are going wrong, and then when Gwen wants to go back and, save Nick from the fire in their apartment building. And then you see, Drax and JD, and you see the guy that wants to be he's a cop. You just add, like, the levels to it. I think that was a really cool twist. And then, of course, for it to come back and have Melanie be the person who's the real villain. I really like that twist. I think horror movies like this, I think thrillers like this need to have a really good twist. And this is the first movie that I can remember for this year, that's come out this year, that I wasn't shocked. I wasn't really scared during this movie. Did I feel bad at certain points? Did I feel bad when certain characters died? Of course I did. Because that's the type of person I am. Like when, I'm getting up the cast list here. When Patrick's dad dies, okay, when you think that he was able to save him, and it turns out that the creatures or the demons that this island produces won't let him get away, that they're gonna kill Patrick's dad. I was moved by that. I thought that was a really good twist. I thought that was something that I didn't see coming. And that's about it. That's about all the good things I can say about this movie, because the rest of this movie was very rough to watch. And those of you that have seen it, you know what I'm talking about. There's a really good quote when I was reading some of the critics for this movie after I left it, right? Peter Travers, who writes for the Rolling Stones, he gave this film 0 out of 5 stars and said, if crimes against cinema merited persecution, Fantasy Island would go directly to death row. Now, it's a very rough sentence. It's a very rough way to to look at this movie. I don't think that it was that bad, but then you look at Richard Ropers for the Chicago Sun-Times, who said it feels like someone planted about a half dozen different scripts all over Fantasy Island. Now, that I can agree with. It did feel like a lot of times that there was... Now, I don't want to call it character malpractice. I don't want to call it a lack of development of characters, but it easily could have been that. It easily could have been somebody saying, like, we're not going to spend, instead of spending 2 hours on developing this character, instead of spending an hour and a half developing this character, we're going to spend about 20 to 30 minutes for this character's arc. It did make a lot of sense. The one guy who I kind of wish that they could have done a better job with was Patrick's character. Patrick, who his dad dies jumping on a grenade, and I think we should have seen this earlier. And maybe I'm just a dunce. Maybe I was just so enthralled in these like demons that this island was creating that didn't really make a ton of sense. Like I didn't really. I don't know. You gotta suspend your disbelief watching these type of movies. You gotta kind of just remove yourself from the presence of mind, because if you try to overthink these type of movies, that's when you start pulling at threads and then the entire movie falls apart. When Brax's character decides to stay on the island for the rest of his life, decides to let his brother JD get off the island, I was really confused by that. Because is this guy that's going to live in the real world, potentially go get married, potentially go have kids? Is he real? Or is he just like a demon, a mystic, a thing that the island created? And what happens if something happens to him? Like, say he gets in a car crash. Is he going to turn to water like the other demon creatures that the island created? Or is he actually going to bleed? Because let me tell you something. If I accidentally, get in a head-on collision with somebody, or I accidentally T-bone somebody because, I think the light is yellow when it's actually red, and I come through an intersection, I accidentally T-bone this guy, and I jump out of my car, and the next thing I know is the guy in the next car turns into a puddle. Look, there's a lot of things that can cause a psychological tear, a breakdown. That would be one of them, I think, is seeing that somebody just turn to a puddle of water or start bleeding dark spring water out of their eyes. It didn't make a lot of sense to me. I didn't really buy that. I didn't like that as much. Also, the idea that you're going to keep your wife on the island if you are Mr. Roki, right? If you're Roki, why are you making it so where you're introducing yourself to her constantly? Because they were on the island maybe 3 days. If we want to go really stretch it and say 4. They may be on the island for 4 days. And between those 4 days, the person, the demon, the figment that he is imagining to be his wife dies. In 4 days. There are, 365 days a year. Okay? 365 days a year divided by, let's just say, we'll just make it easy and say 5. Say it takes 5 days for her to die. That's 73 times a year that you're going to have to reintroduce yourself to this figment. Now, I don't know about you, but that's not a fantasy. That's torture. And this entire island, let's just break it down. This entire island, kind of a hellhole. Kind of shitty. These, demons will mess with your fantasy, and the premise of it was no fantasy actually is what you want it to be. That if you want it to be one thing, then odds are it's going to be something else, and that it never really ends. Fantasy Island's a critics' consensus on Rotten Tomatoes was the Fantasy Island tries to show audiences the dark side of wish fulfillment, but mainly serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of exhuming long-dead franchises. Now, I think that this movie could have been done differently. I think that there was a lot of things that went wrong with it. I think there's a lot of things that they could have changed. I think that at the end of the day, when you're looking at this movie, it's not a perfect movie, but no movie is. I liked it. I thought it was 6.5. I thought it was 6.5 out of 10. Because what did this movie do for me? Did it give me escapism? Yeah. while I was watching the movie, I checked my phone maybe twice. Which, to be completely honest with you, I can barely go through an episode of Seinfeld without checking my phone 3 or 4 times. That's a 30-minute show. This movie is about 2 hours long, maybe 2:15. I checked my phone twice because it's later, and I wanted to make sure that nobody needed me. Nobody was like hitting me up and saying like, "Hey, where's this like basketball story?" or "Hey, where's this other thing?" And I didn't have to deal with anything, so it gave me escapism. Did I enjoy the characters? Yeah, I thought the twists were really good. Dr. Torture, who was the psychiatrist that she had when her high school bully was like bullying her, I thought that he was a believable character. Not in that like I could see somebody like that existing, but as a monster character in a horror movie, he did a good, okay job. Wasn't my favorite, wasn't the worst. That's why I'm saying 6.5. Because it's a very average horror movie. There's a bunch of jump scares. There's a bunch of things that like a bump in the dark type of stuff. Don't love that. You know, they brought Patrick. He got stabbed. They bring him back at the last second to jump on the grenade. I thought that was kind of cheesy, a little bit corny. To do that, you know, it's fine. Just leave him dead. It's not that big of a deal. I'm very curious. I want a spin-off. I want to know what happens with these characters that they get off the island. Like, if this is one of those movies that if you told me, hey, we're making Fantasy Island 2, it's going to go straight to Netflix, I'm here for it. I'm going to check that out. I'm watching that. Because I bought enough into the other characters, I think. I think I cared enough about the other characters in the show. I care enough about Salone's character. Is she going to get back with her husband after her marriage was essentially ruined by Melanie? Like, what are we gonna do there? Is she gonna meet her husband and say, "Hey, you'll never guess what I was tortured"? And then when he says, "I don't believe you," she's gonna show her the cut on the arm and be like, "Look, no, seriously, this is crazy. Remember the girl I bullied? Yeah, no, she completely snapped. She has this entire fantasy fetish deal and almost kills like a bunch of us. This is crazy." Are we going to learn anything more about Gwen? Is Gwen going to get back to the real world and hit up her person? Is she going to hit up her guy? What was his name? Damien, right? Is she going to hit up Damien? Is she going to hit up Alan? Is she going to hit up Alan? I should say. Is she going to knock on that door 5 years later and say, "Hey, the biggest regret of my life is not saying yes when you proposed to Mary"? I want to know more. Also, got to find out if JD is a real person or not. Is he going to turn to water if something happens to him? This is a movie that if you told me, "Hey, we're making a spinoff," I'm here for it. Honestly, I am. Now, what is the most rewatchable scene? Because we always do this on all of these episodes. We talk about what is the most rewatchable scene of this movie. And this is a tough one. Because, like any good horror movie, it is recyclable. You do it, you have a good time watching it, you put it away, throw it in the recycle bin, and then in 6 or 7 years, we recycle the idea and we make the same movie again. This movie, I think the most rewatchable scene for me has to be, I want to say it's the fire scene. I want to say when Gwen's running through her apartment building and she sees Braxton, she sees JD, and she sees Patrick, and she realizes that this is either A, Nick's mom's crazy fantasy where they all die, or something. That is that I think is the most rewatchable scene to me. So, that's going to do it for the show. I've been teasing this big career news all week. I'm going to slip it in here at the end of this podcast. So if you listen to the entire thing, if you listen to the entire podcast and you have been listening all week and you care about this, I'll slip this in right here. So a couple weeks ago, as a person who's graduating from college in 13 weeks, I have been applying for jobs constantly. Anybody who's applied for jobs in the last year and a half knows that it is a constant cycle of rejection. This is like speed dating at the Playboy Mansion, essentially. Because it's rejection after rejection after rejection after rejection. And, to be fair, it's not that bad. Because you apply for a bunch of jobs, you get a bunch of rejection letters back. I'd rather cast a wide net than a small one. So getting the rejection letters back is not the end of the world. Also, I make connections with the people that I apply with. I usually hit up somebody who works at the company, usually on the creative side, usually on the content creation side more than the HR side of it. I hit them up, talk to them a little bit. How's the company? What are your hours like? Is it a good environment? So I do that. So it's not the end of the world. But I ran into this company. It's called Believe Sports. Believe Sports. On LinkedIn, they had urgent. So they were trying to look for somebody. So that means to me that they're hiring very liberally. That the odds are that I'm going to apply and they're going to get back to me. And they did. They get back to me. Immediately I have to tell them, hey, by the way, just FYI, in case that this matters, I don't graduate till May. They were like, it doesn't really matter. It's podcasting. We like your resume. We listened to the demos that you sent. Sounds good. So I was like, all right, great. So then they say to me, let's do a phone interview. I'm like, great. So we do the interview. It goes swimmingly. Good interview. Great people over there. They say, would you be interested in doing a college football podcast? If you haven't been keeping up with the show, you didn't listen to the old show, I did hundreds of episodes. 69 of those episodes was about college football. I did a preview for every team. So, to say the least, I am very excited to do college football. I said, sure. What's the plan? Well, we usually put young hosts with former athletes. So I say, okay, that's great. Who's the former athlete? What are we thinking here? And immediately I go to my head and I think, okay, it's probably going to be a quarterback or a specialty player. It's not. Odds are we're not going to get an offensive lineman. Odds are we're not going to get a kicker or a punter. What's the plan? So they say, what colleges would you be interested in covering? Well, living in San Marcos, close to Austin, living in the San Antonio area my entire life, I'm thinking to myself, probably UT would make the most sense, but I can do any team. If you said to me, Andrew, I need you to go cover UCF, the Golden Knights, I'd say, great. Let me dive in. Let me know more about the team. I'll break down the scouting. I'll break down the recruiting. I'll do whatever you need me to do. But luckily they said, what do you want to do? I said, I don't care. They said, how do you feel about LSU? I said, I like LSU. Yeah, what do you got for me? So former quarterback Josh Booty and I potentially, and again, this is not in writing yet. We don't have a contract signed. The only thing I know for certain is that I have a login. That I've been able to log into their website and that I can upload the podcasts when we record them. So, the plan is, tentatively, very thin ice right now. Nothing is certain. I don't have any expectations. I don't have any high expectations, let's just say. I want this to be the best product we can put out there, but at the same time, I understand being somebody who's a little bit younger. Josh is a very moving around type of guy. I get it if this doesn't work. I want it to. I really do. But if it doesn't work, if it don't mesh, that's just how these things work. But they seem to really like me over there. I seem to really like them. I've listened to a little bit of their content. And when I say this, I mean this very honestly. I think that I fit in very well there. I think that I'm going to be able to succeed there. I think that I'm going to be able to rise to the top there. Okay, that's just me being completely honest with you. I think that's the goals. That's where that's what I'm looking at when I look at their company. I think that there's a very good shot that this podcast is going to work. Josh is a very knowledgeable guy. Played quarterback there for 2 seasons at LSU. He's got really good connections to Baton Rouge and Louisiana football scene. Of course, he's got a kid of his own. He's got some nephews who are very connected to the high school quarterback range. Playing in Texas. So I'm very excited for this opportunity, very excited to get this thing rolling. So if you haven't been keeping up with the show, if you don't listen every week, there you go. That's your little tidbit into the behind the scenes, the curtain behind there. But we're still going to do this podcast every day. It's a daily. I love doing it. We're getting a lot of really good feedback. You guys have been killing it on the streams. We could do a little bit better, to be completely honest with you. If you want to send it to a couple more of your friends, you want to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, you give us a rating, you review it, you share it. That's really how we can get this ball really rolling. But Film Friday, you guys seem to really like that. So, Fantasy Island, I'm giving it 6.5 out of 10. Thank you so much for listening. I will hear you guys on Monday. I'll be back here on Monday to break down all of the weekend's news. Thanks, guys.